I was 32 when I thought I had everything figured out. I had a job I loved, assistant professor of environmental science at a small university in Denver, Colorado. It wasn't glamorous, but it was fulfilling. I woke up each day knowing I was making a difference, shaping the minds of students who might one day change the world. My apartment, modest by most standards, was mine. It was a quiet space filled with bookshelves, plants, and a few worn-out pieces of furniture I'd picked up secondhand. I could pay the rent each month without worry, and that was enough. I had a fiancée, Olivia, who seemed to be everything I wanted. I thought I'd found the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. We'd been together for 3 years, and after much planning, I was getting ready to propose. I didn't know then, but that decision would be the beginning of the end. It's funny, how you think you have everything under control, only for it all to come crashing down when you least expect it. That was the day Olivia walked out of my life. No warning, no signs, just gone. And not just gone, she left me for my brother Kyle. Kyle was everything I wasn't. He was 4 years older than me, but that age gap felt like a lifetime when you looked at where we stood in life. He was a tech entrepreneur, someone who had built his career from the ground up, and was now pulling in more money than most people could ever dream of. While I was teaching high school biology, making barely enough to get by, Kyle was living in a penthouse in downtown Denver. He had the Porsche, the tailored suits, the luxury vacations. I hated to admit it, but I was envious. He seemed to have it all, and everyone around him was constantly praising his success. Our father, Greg, was no help. Dad had always been hard on me. He was a successful lawyer and had built a career around wealth, ambition, and the constant pursuit of more. He couldn't understand why I'd chosen teaching over corporate law, why I wanted to help kids learn about the environment instead of joining the corporate ladder where the big money was. "You're wasting your potential, son," he would tell me at every family dinner. "Kyle gets it. He knows how to win." I'd shrug it off, tell myself I didn't need his approval. But every year as Kyle's fortune grew, the nagging doubt crept in. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe I was just too content with my small, humble life. Then there was Olivia. I met her at a friend's birthday party, and she was exactly what I thought I wanted. Tall, blonde, confident, with a sharp sense of humor that had me laughing every time she spoke. She worked at a boutique downtown, always wearing the latest trends, and had this dream of a life filled with luxury. Shopping sprees, vacations in Europe, expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford. She spoke of these things like they were the definition of happiness. At first, I thought I could give her that life. But deep down, I wasn't sure I could. I was a teacher, after all. She never seemed to mind that I didn't have the money to offer, but sometimes when she talked about her dreams, I felt a pang of doubt. Maybe I wasn't enough. I proposed after 2 years of dating. It was supposed to be a beautiful moment, a culmination of everything we'd worked toward together. I saved for months, scrimping and cutting back on everything just to afford a modest engagement ring. I took her to a cozy little restaurant on the outskirts of Denver, the kind with dim lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. I thought I'd planned the perfect evening. She cried when I asked her to marry me. I was on top of the world. I thought, this is it. I've found the one. This is everything I need to be happy. The first cracks began to show just after that. It started with the way she started spending more time with Kyle. At first, it was nothing. He'd call for advice about some business deal, or they'd chat about a restaurant they'd visited recently. But then, over time, I noticed the little things. The way Olivia started mentioning Kyle more in our conversations. "Kyle says I should take that trip to Paris. He knows the best places to visit," she'd say casually. Or, "Kyle thinks I should invest in this company he's working with. He says it's the next big thing." I told myself it was fine. Kyle was successful, after all, and of course, Olivia would value his opinion. He was the kind of person who always seemed to know what to do, always a step ahead. I laughed it off. But then came the night that changed everything. I came home from work early one evening, looking forward to a quiet night. But when I walked into our living room, I saw Olivia's phone sitting on the coffee table. It was unlocked, just sitting there. A notification flashed across the screen, and I couldn't help myself. I picked it up. The message was from Kyle. It said, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped. I opened the thread and my world shattered. The messages between Olivia and Kyle were full of flirtation, secrecy, and promises. They'd been having an affair for months. I read through the messages in disbelief. There was no mistaking it. Olivia had been telling Kyle she was settling for me. She wanted more. She wanted luxury. She wanted a life Kyle could give her. He had been feeding her dreams of success, of what life could be like if she left me behind. When Olivia came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the couch, her phone in my hand. She smiled, unaware of what I had just discovered. "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "How long have you been sleeping with my brother?" She froze. I could see the guilt flash in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something colder. "5 months," she said, as though it was nothing. "I chose Kyle because he can give me everything I want. You've always been comfortable, Aaron, but comfort isn't enough anymore." I stared at her, feeling numb. My whole world was falling apart, and all I could do was watch. I had loved her. I thought I was enough, but I wasn't. The next few days felt like a blur, a thick fog that I couldn't quite escape. Olivia left that night, taking her things and the engagement ring I'd bought her. I didn't cry. Not yet. I couldn't. It was like I was on autopilot, walking through my own life, but not really living it. I kept thinking back to everything, our time together, the plans we'd made, the future I had thought we would share. I kept asking myself how I had missed it. How had I not seen it coming? But the truth was, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe that the woman I had planned to marry could betray me like that. And I sure as hell didn't want to believe that my brother, the person I thought I could trust the most, would be the one to tear everything apart. That night, I called Kyle. The phone rang twice before he picked up, and his voice on the other end sounded like he'd been expecting my call. He wasn't even surprised. "What's up, Aaron?" he asked, his tone casual, almost too casual. I felt the heat rise in my chest. I wanted to scream, to rage, but instead I just asked, "How could you do this to me, Kyle?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he replied. "Come on, Aaron," he said, almost sounding amused. "She's a smart, beautiful woman. She deserves more than you can give her. I'm just giving her what she wants. She's happy now." I could feel my blood boiling. "You knew what she meant to me. You knew what you were doing." Kyle's voice didn't change. "It's not about you, Aaron. She made her choice. I'm just helping her get what she wants. If you're upset, that's on you." I hung up the phone before he could say anything else, slamming it down on the table. My chest was tight, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The man I had looked up to my entire life, my older brother, the one I thought I could trust, had destroyed me without even a second thought. And Olivia, the woman I had given my heart to, had left me for the man who had always been everything I wasn't. The days that followed felt like I was moving through life in a daze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I'd lose track of time, staring blankly at the walls, replaying every moment, every conversation I had ever had with Olivia and Kyle. Had there been signs? Could I have seen it coming? But it didn't matter now. The damage was done. They had both made their choices, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I no longer recognized. I started showing up to work barely functional, my students noticing the change. They weren't stupid. I had always been a teacher who cared, who showed up prepared and engaged. Now, I was just going through the motions. I barely even remembered what I was teaching half the time. I could see the concern on my students' faces, and it only made me feel worse. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want anyone's pity. Then one afternoon, after a particularly rough class, a student named Lucas stayed behind. "Mr. Jacobs," he said, standing by my desk as the last of the students filed out. "You okay?" I looked up at him, confused for a moment, then realized he was talking to me. I smiled faintly, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah, Lucas, I'm fine. Just tired." Lucas didn't seem convinced. "You don't look fine, sir. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. My mom says when things get hard, you have to keep going, even when it's tough. That's what being brave looks like." I blinked at him, not sure how to respond. This kid, who I'd barely noticed before, was speaking more wisdom than I had in weeks. My eyes stung, and for the first time in days, I realized I wasn't completely alone. I might not have anyone else in my personal life, but I still had my students. I still had a purpose. That conversation stuck with me. Tyler's words echoed in my head over the following days. Maybe it was time to stop falling apart and start rebuilding. I'd always been someone who believed in purpose, in doing the right thing even when it was hard. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost that. I'd gotten so caught up in my own pain that I forgot what I stood for. I started going to therapy. I knew I needed it. I found a woman named Dr. Miller who helped me work through the anger and the hurt. She encouraged me to focus on something that would give me a sense of control again, something productive, something positive. That's when I started thinking about my passion for environmental conservation and education. I had always wanted to do more, to have a broader impact beyond the classroom. One night, while I was at home brainstorming ideas, I reached out to Anna, a colleague of mine who taught environmental science at a local middle school. We talked in passing about how hard it was to engage younger students with the complexities of climate change and how there was a lack of resources that truly made the subject interesting. We decided to team up and develop something new, an interactive educational app that could help kids learn about climate change through engaging interactive games. We called it EcoQuest. It started small, just the two of us working late into the night, but over time, it grew into something bigger. We poured our hearts into it, designing the curriculum, coding the app, and making sure it was accessible to a wide range of students. As the months passed, the app started to gain traction. Schools reached out, asking to use it in their classrooms. Publishers began showing interest. A year later, EcoQuest was bought by a major educational tech company for $5 million. I couldn't believe it. After the legal fees and taxes, I walked away with $2.5 million. I was 33, and suddenly, my financial worries were gone. But here's the thing. The money didn't change me. It didn't define me. I still loved teaching. I still believed in the importance of education. I didn't need the flashy car or the penthouse apartment. What mattered to me now was building something that would last, something that would make a difference. I used a portion of my newfound wealth to create a scholarship fund for students who wanted to pursue environmental science. I didn't need the fame or the recognition. I just wanted to know that I was doing the right thing. As I sat back and looked at everything I had built, I realized something. The pain from Olivia and Kyle's betrayal was still there, but it didn't define me. I had taken the worst moment of my life and turned it into something better. I had made a choice to move forward, to not let them win. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. A year passed since the sale of EcoQuest, and my life had taken a turn I never could have imagined when Olivia left me. I was no longer the same person who had been shattered on the bathroom floor, my world crumbling with the betrayal of two people I trusted more than anyone else. I had rebuilt myself. Piece by piece, not just professionally, but emotionally. I was still teaching, still working on my environmental projects, and still living in the same modest home I had before. Money didn't change who I was. It only allowed me to focus on what mattered most: purpose, integrity, and the people who truly cared about me. Then things took another unexpected turn when I met Emily. She was a fellow environmental advocate, passionate about ocean conservation. We met at a conference in Seattle, of all places. I had almost decided not to go. Too many late nights working on EcoQuest, but something told me to attend, to take a break, and be surrounded by people who shared my vision for the planet. Emily was at a panel I was speaking on, and we ended up chatting afterward over coffee. Her smile was warm, her laugh genuine, and she had this way of talking about her work that made you feel like you could change the world with her. It wasn't like the instant spark I thought I'd had with Olivia. With Emily, it was more like a slow burn, comfortable and natural. There was no pressure, no grand expectations. She didn't care about my money or my past. She cared about what I did, about how I was trying to make the world better, about the values I held. And the more we talked, the more I realized that was exactly what I needed. Someone who loved me for who I was, not for what I could offer. We dated long distance for 8 months, flying between Denver and her home in San Francisco, finding time in our busy schedules to make it work. It wasn't always easy, but every time we spoke or saw each other, it felt right. I had been afraid of starting over, afraid that I might somehow bring the baggage of my past relationships into something new. But with Emily, everything felt clean, untainted. She never asked about the money I'd made or the fact that I had once been on the receiving end of betrayal. She never judged me for my past. Instead, she encouraged me to keep doing the work that mattered. When I finally told her everything about Olivia, about Kyle, about the heartbreak, about the betrayal, I waited for some kind of judgment, some kind of hesitation. But Emily just listened, really listened, without interrupting or offering unsolicited advice. And when I finished, she simply said, "I'm with you because of who you are. Your work matters. You matter." It was the simplest, most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. And that's when I knew. I wasn't ready to make the same mistake again. I was ready to open myself up to the right person. To the person who saw me, not just my past, but everything that made me who I was, and who would accept that, flaws and all. We got married a year later. It wasn't a big, extravagant wedding. No big ceremony or anything resembling what Olivia and I had once imagined. It was small, intimate, just a few close friends, family, and the people who had been part of our journey. It was held in a quiet vineyard on a hill overlooking the valley. There were no grand speeches, no showy displays of wealth, just two people making a commitment to each other, surrounded by people who genuinely cared. Emily and I had a daughter, Ella, about a year after the wedding. It's strange how parenthood can change everything. It brings into sharp focus the things you thought were important and the things you didn't even know mattered. Ella is a reminder of everything that went wrong in the past, but also everything that went right. She's a constant reminder of why I've chosen to live the life I live today, not for wealth, not for success in the eyes of others, but for love, for family, for purpose. Then it happened. The call came from my mother one Wednesday morning while I was having coffee with Emily in the kitchen. My father had died unexpectedly of a heart attack. I wasn't sure how to feel. I had spent years estranged from my father after I refused to attend Kyle's wedding to Olivia. That was the last time we had spoken. My father, in his usual way, telling me I was ungrateful, that I was holding on to old grudges, that I needed to let it go. But I couldn't let it go. Not when my own family had betrayed me. Not when he had chosen to turn his back on me, instead of acknowledging the hurt. But that morning, Emily and I packed our bags and made the trip to my childhood home in the suburbs of Denver. The funeral was quiet, somber, but nothing that I hadn't expected. I was there for my mother, for the family who had always been supportive, but I wasn't sure I could say I was there for my father. And that's when I saw them. Kyle and Olivia walked in together, their faces tight, trying to maintain the appearance of a perfect couple. Olivia was wearing black, but it was clearly an expensive dress. Kyle, of course, was dressed in a designer suit. They looked exactly the same as they had all those years ago, smug, self-assured, as if nothing had ever happened between us. Olivia's eyes locked onto mine across the room, and her lips curled into a smile that was meant to be a taunt. She leaned in close enough for me to smell her expensive perfume. "So I guess I won, right?" she whispered, her voice dripping with arrogance. "You're still just a professor while I'm living the life I always dreamed of." I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the old anger bubbling up inside me. Instead, I smiled, my voice steady. "Yeah, well, meet my wife." Emily stood next to me, calm and beautiful, her hand wrapped around mine. Olivia's face froze, her smug expression faltering as she realized what I had said. The words hung in the air, and I could see the shift in her. Suddenly, the truth was staring her in the face. She hadn't won. I had. Kyle stood beside her, his face betraying nothing, but I could see the shift in him too. He knew I had won in a way they couldn't understand. The funeral wasn't just about saying goodbye to my father. It was about closure. It was the final chapter in a painful story that had shaped me into the person I had become. And for the first time in years, I was at peace with that. Later, Kyle approached me. "Aaron," he said, extending his hand. I looked at it for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "It's been a while." "Yeah, it has," I said, my tone neutral. "I hope you're doing okay," Kyle added, his voice almost pleading, as if wanting to repair something that couldn't be fixed. I looked at him and felt no anger, no resentment, just a quiet understanding that we were both too far gone. I'm fine, Kyle. I'm really fine. As he walked away with Olivia, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't looking for revenge or validation. I had everything I needed. I had Emily, I had Ella, and I had a life built on values that no amount of money could ever buy. I didn't need their approval, and I certainly didn't need their lies. What I had was real. What I had was enough. 6 months passed since my father's funeral, and life continued on, steady and peaceful. I didn't see much of Kyle or Olivia after that day, and honestly, I didn't care to. They had become nothing more than distant echoes of a past that no longer held any sway over me. My life had taken on a rhythm I found comforting. Teaching, spending time with Emily and Ella, working on my environmental initiatives, and simply being present in the moment. The pain of the past had softened, and while it would never fully go away, I had built something better in its place. Then, one afternoon, my mother called me again. The phone rang just as I was finishing up a meeting with a colleague about a new environmental project I was spearheading. I answered the call with my usual, "Hey, Mom, how's it going?" Her voice sounded different this time, strained, almost nervous. "Erin, I think you should know something," she said, her tone hesitant. I could tell something was off. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Well," she paused, and I could hear her take a deep breath. "I just got off the phone with Kyle. He told me that he and Olivia are getting a divorce." For a second, I didn't know how to respond. The news hit me in a way I didn't expect, even though part of me had always known this was coming. I had heard the rumors over the years about their relationship, about the cracks that had started to show. Still, I couldn't help but feel a slight sense of vindication, not for their failure, but for the fact that they were now facing the same kind of heartbreak I had experienced. "You don't sound surprised," Mom remarked, as if sensing the shift in my tone. "No, I guess I'm not," I replied. "I always knew they were built on a shaky foundation. If you build something on lies and betrayal, it's bound to fall apart eventually." "Olivia left him," she added quietly, and I could hear the sorrow in her voice. "She told him it was because she met someone else." I wasn't sure how to process this. I wasn't happy to hear that Olivia was hurting. After all, I was no longer the person who wished ill upon her or Kyle. I had moved on. I had built something good with Emily and Ella, and my life was rich in ways that no amount of money or status could ever match. But the irony was too much to ignore. Olivia had walked away from me, convinced that Kyle would provide her with the life she dreamed of, only for her to end up leaving him for someone else. It felt like a strange kind of justice, but I didn't feel the rush of triumph I might have once expected. Instead, I just felt indifferent. "She left him for a business partner of his," Mom continued, her voice tinged with sympathy. "I think she finally realized that money isn't everything, and that she needs more than just luxury to make her happy." "I'm sorry, Erin." I felt a tightness in my chest, but it wasn't the anger or sadness I expected. I had come to terms with everything long ago, and I knew that in the end, Olivia's choices had nothing to do with me. I wasn't the one who had walked away from our relationship. She had. I wasn't the one who had abandoned our vows, our future. She had. "I'm not angry anymore, Mom," I said softly. "It's hard to explain, but I don't wish them any ill will. If Olivia is finally figuring things out, I hope she finds the happiness she's been chasing all these years. But I'm not part of that story anymore. I've got my own life now." My mother was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the relief in her voice when she spoke again. "I'm glad to hear that, Erin. You've been through so much, but you've come out stronger on the other side. I just want you to be happy." "I am, Mom," I said. "I really am." We ended the call soon after, and I sat there, the phone still in my hand, my mind racing. I thought about all the years I had spent wondering if I was good enough, if I was making the right choices. I thought about how deeply I had been hurt by Olivia's betrayal and how much I had allowed it to define me. But I realized something now. I had stopped letting the past define my future. My life, my worth, wasn't tied to anyone else's choices but my own. As the months went on, I saw less and less of Kyle and Olivia. We didn't keep in touch, and I didn't feel the need to. Emily and I were busy with work, with Ella, with life. There was no time for the past, no time to revisit old wounds. And as much as my mother kept me updated on the remnants of my old life, I didn't seek out any more information. Eventually, I did hear about Kyle's struggles. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that his business was faltering. The empire he had built on tech consulting was crumbling, and he was trying to rebuild with little success. I won't lie and say I didn't feel a small sense of satisfaction, but more than that, I felt something else, a quiet sense of peace. Kyle had always prided himself on winning, on being better than everyone else. But the truth was, his success had always been built on vanity, on competition, on comparison. And now, when he was finally being tested, when his own life was falling apart, I realized that the life I had built, the one I had struggled to rebuild after everything fell apart, was the only one that mattered. I wasn't interested in competing with him anymore. I had something far more valuable: real connections, real love, real purpose. 6 months after my mother's call, Kyle reached out to me. It was unexpected, but when I saw his name flash across my phone screen, I couldn't bring myself to ignore it. I answered. "Aaron," Kyle said, his voice sounding tired, defeated. "I don't expect you to understand, but I wanted to apologize for everything, for what I did to you. I was selfish, and I've realized that now." I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, unsure of what to say. "I appreciate you saying that, Kyle. I do. But I've moved on. You and I both know there's nothing we can do to change the past. I'm not holding on to any resentment. I don't need an apology from you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Kyle spoke again. "I get it," he said quietly. "I really do. But I wanted you to know I've changed. I'm trying to fix things. Not just with you, but with myself." "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. "But I'm not part of that anymore. I've found my own way." The conversation ended there, and I felt no bitterness, no anger, just a quiet, final closure. Kyle's apology wasn't for me. It was for him. It was for the life he had built on lies, on broken relationships, on winning at all costs. And in that moment, I realized that the only real victory in life was finding peace with yourself. It's strange, isn't it? How you can spend so much time running from your past, trying to outrun the pain, only to realize that the past is never really gone. It's always there, buried beneath the surface, waiting to resurface when you least expect it. But here's the thing I've learned over the past few years. The past doesn't define you. The choices you make now, today, they're what matter. And I've spent a lot of time making the right choices, carving out a life that's mine, a life I can be proud of. Emily and I have built something special. It's not flashy, it's not something anyone would see and immediately think, that's success. But for me, it's everything. I still teach, still wake up every morning with the same excitement about shaping young minds, about showing them the importance of understanding our planet and taking responsibility for it. But teaching is just one part of it. I've continued working on environmental projects, developing solutions that can make a real difference, especially in underserved communities. The scholarship fund I set up has allowed several students to follow in my footsteps, to pursue environmental science when they might not have had the means to otherwise. That, more than anything else, is the kind of success that matters to me. Ella, our daughter, is growing so fast. She's 18 months now, and every day she surprises us with how much she picks up, how much she understands. Emily and I laugh at how much she mirrors both of us, a perfect combination of our quirks and personalities. I never imagined the kind of joy she would bring into my life, but it's more than I ever could have hoped for. Emily and I have moments where we just look at each other, and we know we've built something real, something lasting. We're in this together, and that's all that matters. But there are days when I still think about everything that happened, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but because it's part of my story. Olivia and Kyle, their betrayal, it all led me here. I didn't know it at the time, but losing everything I thought I wanted freed me to build something better. I remember how I used to think that the pain would never end, that I would be stuck in this endless loop of grief and betrayal. But time has a funny way of healing. It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, gradual, and suddenly one day you realize you're no longer the person you were, the person who was crushed by betrayal, the person who couldn't see a way out. And now, when I think about the past, I don't feel the sting anymore. I don't even feel resentment. I think I finally made peace with it. It's funny, though. There was a time when I thought that the best revenge would be showing Olivia and Kyle how well I'd done. I imagined them seeing me living the life I always wanted, one that was full of purpose and fulfillment. But here's the thing. Revenge doesn't work the way we think it does. When you're focused on getting even, you're still letting those people control your life. The truth is, I never needed to show them anything. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. What I needed was to be true to myself, to find my own happiness, to build a life that felt right to me. And that's exactly what I did. The last time I saw Kyle was at a conference. It was just a few months ago, and I had no idea he'd be there. I hadn't seen him in a while, hadn't spoken to him since that phone call when he apologized, and frankly, I hadn't expected to. But there he was, sitting at a panel across the room. He spotted me before I saw him, and our eyes met. For a moment, I could see the hesitation in his eyes, that old tension between us. He stood up, walked over, and greeted me with the same forced politeness he had all those years ago. "Aaron," he said, extending his hand. "It's been a while." I could feel Emily beside me, her presence steady and calming, and I realized then just how far I had come. I wasn't the same person who would have gotten angry or defensive. I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. "Yeah," I said, shaking his hand briefly, "it has." We made small talk, nothing of real substance. I didn't ask him about Olivia or what had happened between them. I didn't need to. I didn't care. Kyle was still trying to project that same image of success, but there was something about him now, something that was different from the confident, arrogant man he had been all those years ago. The mask had cracked, and I could see it. At one point, he mentioned his business was still struggling, that he was trying to pivot, trying to salvage what he could. I didn't offer advice. I didn't feel the need to tell him how to fix it. Instead, I just listened, nodded, and offered a simple, "I hope it works out for you." And I meant it. Not because I wanted to be kind to him, but because I had no need to carry the weight of anger or resentment anymore. That was his burden, not mine. The conversation ended awkwardly, as most conversations with Kyle had in the past. He walked away, back to his table, and I found myself standing there, staring at the space where he had been. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no desire for validation, just nothing. And it was freeing. It was a quiet kind of victory, the kind that only comes when you stop letting someone else's actions define you. Later that evening, Emily and I sat outside, the cool night air brushing against our skin, and I told her about the encounter. "He's trying to fix things," I said, almost as if I was still processing it myself. "But I don't think he's ever going to fix what's really broken." Emily squeezed my hand. "It's not your responsibility anymore. You fixed your own life." And she was right. I had. I didn't need Kyle or Olivia to change. I had already changed. I had built the life I wanted, a life filled with purpose, love, and peace. As the night went on, we talked about our plans for the future. Ella, of course, was part of every conversation. Emily and I had dreams of traveling more, of introducing Ella to the world outside our bubble. There was so much left to explore, so much to look forward to. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. I wasn't chasing something I thought I needed. I was just living, enjoying the life I had built, the family I had, and the peace I had found. And that, I realized, was all the victory I needed. It's strange how much can change in a few short years. I used to think my life was defined by what I had lost. Olivia, my brother Kyle, the trust I thought I had in both of them. I spent so much time grieving what I'd lost, wondering how I could have done things differently, wondering if I could have saved my relationship or my family. But that was the past. And now, when I look at my life today, it's hard to even recognize the person I was back then. I found a peace I never thought I'd have. A peace that comes not from the things I've accumulated, but from the relationships I've built and the choices I've made along the way. Emily and I are planning a trip next summer. We've been talking about taking Ella to some of the national parks, showing her the world in a way that makes sense for our family. We talk about the future often, about everything we still want to experience. For once, I'm not thinking about what I've lost or what I could have had. I'm thinking about everything I've gained, about the family I've created, about the work I'm doing that matters, and about the legacy I want to leave behind. But even as I look forward to what's ahead, there are days when the past comes to mind. Not in a way that brings me down, but in a way that reminds me of how far I've come. The phone call came from my mother, and I wasn't expecting it. My heart skipped a beat when I saw her name on the caller ID. It had been a while since we'd talked. There were no family crises, no drama. Things had been calm. But there was something about the way my mother said my name that made me sit up a little straighter. "Aaron," she said, her voice tight, "you need to know something." I felt my stomach tighten. "What's going on, Mom?" "It's Kyle," she said, her voice trembling. "He's in trouble. His business, well, it's all gone under. He's lost everything. His company's bankrupt, and he's asking for your help." I sat there silent, letting the words sink in. I had never been the kind of person to wish ill on anyone. But Kyle? After everything that had happened between us, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt a pang of sympathy, a small part of me that still remembered the brother I once had. But another part of me, probably the bigger part, felt something else. Relief. Relief, not because I wanted him to fail, but because I knew now, more than ever, that my success wasn't dependent on him. It wasn't dependent on anyone but me. I had built my life from the ground up, not with money or manipulation, but with purpose. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Kyle, drag me down into their mess. I told my mom I needed some time to think about it. She understood, though I could tell she was disappointed by my hesitation. Kyle had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in her eyes. I understood why she was concerned, why she wanted me to help him. But I also knew I couldn't. I had to draw a line. For me, for Emily, for Ella. I took a walk that evening. The weather was crisp, the sun setting behind the mountains in a way that made the world seem to pause for just a moment. I thought about Kyle and everything he had done to me, to our family, to Olivia. I thought about how he had always been so obsessed with winning, how that desire for validation had cost him everything. He was still the same person he had always been, the one who needed to prove something, who couldn't see beyond the next business deal, the next win. But I wasn't that person anymore. When I came back to the house, Emily could tell something was on my mind. She looked at me, concerned, and I told her about the call from my mom. Her expression softened, and she took my hand. "What do you think you're going to do?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I said, sitting down beside her. Part of me wants to help him, but another part of me knows that if I do, I'm just enabling him. He's never learned to stand on his own 2 feet, and I can't keep saving him. Emily nodded. "You've done the work, Aaron. You've built your life on your own. You've built a family. I think you know what you need to do." She was right. I knew exactly what I had to do. Helping Kyle now would be nothing more than a Band-Aid for a much deeper wound. He needed to learn how to fix things himself. And if that meant hitting rock bottom, then maybe that was what had to happen for him to finally get it. For him to understand that there's more to life than winning at all costs. The next day, I called my mom. I told her I couldn't help Kyle. I told her I had made my peace with the past, but that didn't mean I had to keep carrying the weight of Kyle's mistakes. She was upset, of course, but I could hear the understanding in her voice. "I just don't want him to be alone in this," she said softly. "He's not alone, Mom. He has to figure this out on his own, and I can't keep letting him pull me into his chaos." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of relief. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, that there would be fallout. But for the first time in my life, I was making a decision that was for me, for my family, for the life I had built, and it felt right. A week later, Kyle reached out to me again. This time it was a simple text message. "I understand. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Aaron. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit for a few days, and when I did reply, it was short and to the point. I hope you find what you're looking for, but I'm not part of this anymore." That was it. The final closure. No more games, no more manipulation, no more lies. Kyle would have to figure it out on his own, and me, I was finally free. The weeks that followed felt like a slow return to normal, though I wasn't sure I even knew what normal was anymore. Emily and I settled into a rhythm with Ella, our little world of late-night feedings, toddler tantrums, and stolen moments of quiet. I spent my days teaching, creating new projects, and pushing myself to continue growing, not just for my own sake, but for the people who depended on me. My life, while not perfect, was mine, and that gave me a sense of peace I had never experienced before. The past was something I no longer felt compelled to revisit, at least not in the way I had when it haunted me daily. But there were still moments when I found myself thinking about Kyle. Not in anger, not with resentment, but with a sense of quiet curiosity. The Kyle I had known, the one who had been driven by ambition, status, and competition, seemed like someone I barely recognized anymore. He was no longer the man I once looked up to. He was someone who had, in his own way, lost his way. I had made my peace with the betrayal. I had forgiven them, or at least I had let go of the anger. But there was always that lingering question in the back of my mind. How did it all go wrong? And while I had long since stopped blaming myself, I still wondered what had happened to the brother I once admired, to the woman I had loved, and what had led them both to make the choices they did. Then one morning, the call came. It was a Thursday, and I was in my office preparing a lesson when the phone rang. It wasn't unusual to get calls during the day, my mother, colleagues, students, but when I saw the caller ID, I froze. It was Kyle. For a moment, I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to him in months. The last text we exchanged had been short, distant, but polite. He'd apologized, but I hadn't felt the need to respond. I didn't owe him anything. Not anymore. I was content with where I was. But there was a part of me that couldn't shake the curiosity. What did he want this time? I picked up the phone. Kyle? I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Aaron, he said, his voice sounding different, softer, less certain. I need to talk to you. I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure what to expect. What's going on? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the hesitation in his voice before he spoke again. I messed up, Aaron. More than you know. I've lost everything. My company, the life I thought I was building, everything. And it's all because I couldn't stop chasing something I didn't even want. I had heard Kyle talk like this before, but there was something different this time. It wasn't just the usual deflection or arrogance. It was raw. It was real. I know I hurt you, he continued, and I know you don't owe me anything, but I need help. I don't know what else to do. I felt a tightness in my chest, a tug of sympathy I hadn't expected. I thought back to everything. How Kyle had betrayed me, how Olivia had walked away for him, how much I had suffered. But the truth was, I was different now. I had moved past it. I didn't need him to fix things for me. I didn't need him to redeem himself to me. But I wasn't sure what kind of help he was asking for. Help with what? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. I don't know, he said, sounding exhausted. Maybe advice. Maybe just, I don't know. I don't even know if you want to hear from me. There it was, the desperation. The Kyle I had known was gone, replaced by someone who had been humbled by failure. It was almost like hearing a stranger's voice on the other end of the line. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. His need for success had come from a place of insecurity, a place where he thought that if he just kept achieving, kept winning, he'd finally be happy. But now, it had all come crashing down. Listen, Kyle, I said, my voice calm but firm. You've made your mistakes. I've made mine. But I can't keep carrying your weight. I've learned that the hard way. What I've built, it's because I worked for it. You need to do the same. I can't fix what's broken in you. That's something only you can do. There was a long silence. I could hear Kyle breathing on the other end, processing what I'd said. Then he finally spoke. I get it, Aaron. I do. He sighed, his voice sounding hollow. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. And I understand if you don't want anything to do with me. I thought about it for a moment. I wasn't angry with him anymore, not like I had been. I didn't need him to fix things between us. But part of me knew that his apology, was the last piece of closure I needed. Not just for him, but for me. It wasn't about forgiveness, really. It was about releasing myself from the past, from the resentment that had kept me tied to it. I wasn't the same person I had been when I had first learned of his betrayal. I had moved on. I had created something better, something real. I'm not holding on to any of it anymore, Kyle. I said softly. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I've made my peace with everything. But you have to do the same. I can't help you fix what's broken. Only you can do that. There was a long pause, and then in a voice that was almost a whisper, Kyle said, I will, Aaron. I swear. I'll make things right. I'll fix myself. We ended the call shortly after that, and I sat there for a while, thinking about everything that had happened, how far I had come. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Kyle to apologize. But hearing him finally admit his mistakes, gave me a sense of peace I didn't expect. It wasn't about him redeeming himself. It was about me knowing that I was finally free of the past. As I sat there, I looked over at Emily, who had been quietly listening in the background. "How do you feel about it?" she asked, her voice gentle. "I'm not sure," I said, letting out a breath, "but I think I'm finally at peace. With everything. With him, with me." And that right there was enough. It was all I needed. In life, it's crucial to remember that your worth isn't defined by others' actions or opinions. Pain, betrayal, and setbacks are inevitable, but they don't determine your future unless you let them. Focus on building a life based on purpose, integrity, and genuine relationships, not on external validation or material success. Forgive, not for others, but for yourself. Release the weight of resentment that holds you back. Understand that true fulfillment comes from doing what matters to you, not from chasing someone else's idea of success. Own your journey, make peace with the past, and focus on creating a meaningful future.